Hello and welcome to another episode of Growing Up B2B. I'm your host, Ed Delia. I'm the second generation president of Delia Associates, the place where family B2B brands go to grow. Today I'm joined by Rick Haig, CEO of Haig Service Corporation. Rick represents the second generation of a business that began in 1971 with a simple but powerful mindset: solve problems and say yes to customer needs. What started with his dad working on TV antennas, wiring, and home electronics eventually evolved into one of the leading life safety and security integrators in the country, consistently recognized among the industry's top 100 companies in this category and named to the Inc. 5000 list multiple times. What makes Rick's story especially interesting is the way that the business evolved over time through iteration, opportunistic growth, acquisitions, and an openness to reinvention. Along the way, Rick stepped in and out of the business multiple times, pursued other entrepreneurial ventures, and built a company culture around resilience and adaptability. And underneath it all is a broader conversation many family businesses wrestle with. How do you evolve a company across generations without losing the mindset that built it in the first place? Rick, welcome to Growing Up B2B.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
Great to have you today. So, for listeners who may not know the backstory, could you explain what Haig Service does today and how the business evolved from TV antennas into this nationally recognized life safety and security company?
Yeah. I mean, the canned speech is, we're a fire security service, robotics, life safety service company. Our tagline, we empower all to be safe in numbers where they live, learn, earn, play, and pray. Um, the main thing, most importantly, the meaning behind all of that is that, what we're doing is we foster what's termed as the propinquity effect. And I have to give a shout out to an intern that I had during the COVID years, Maddie Tashlik, that was the one that actually realized this, during a time when everybody was really craving interaction and being around people. She was the one that realized, very quickly that that's what we do. We secure buildings, people, commercial buildings, schools, office buildings, churches, again, everywhere you live, learn, earn, play, or pray,
Mm-hmm.
so that people can occupy those buildings, not alone, but together.
Mm-hmm.
And, communities are built, not through sharing geography, but through interaction in close proximity with people. And, once she enlightened us to the meaning of propinquity and the propinquity effect from one of her organizational psychology classes at Cornell, it really brought a sense of purpose to what we're doing. We feel as a company that in allowing and securing people to gather en masse, in numbers safely,
Mm-hmm.
that we foster this propinquity and the sense of community and social and economic value brought to businesses and communities in a big way.
Mm. That's awesome. Gotta love those interns.
Yeah, yeah. It's sometimes you get too wrapped up in the day to day, or the P&L and the balance sheet or something else, and someone comes in there and just kind of shines a light on what you're really doing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was like I said, I have to give a shout out to her. It was 100% her, to her credit.
That's awesome. So, getting back to the origins, your father
Hmm.
started the business almost accidentally. He was working full time at AT&T. He was serving in the military reserves, and this was kind of a side business, right?
Yeah, I mean,
More
I
or
think
less.
it was born of not being a business at all. When he got out of active duty in the Army and into the reserves and started with the Bell Systems, we moved it to New Jersey, and uh, we had a house being built in where we live here. My mom still lives in Bridgewater, and our neighbor was also having a house being built, and came over and saw a person running a TV antenna wire back then. If you have any listeners that are old enough to know what a TV antenna is, um, that in the house, and just assumed he was a contractor and said, "Hey, I'd like to have one of those put in my house as well." And my dad, never being one to turn down an opportunity to make a buck, said, "Sure thing, no problem. This is how much it'll be." And I'm not sure how long it took the neighbor to realize that this was actually his neighbor, but my dad got his first job. And, and then he just started doing that on weekends and sides and, side time and everything else. And over the years, it just evolved from there. He was willing to basically try to solve a problem or, you know, serve however he could.
Mm,
He always did. And the fact that it was a way for him to also have an economic income from it just made it
mhm,
all the better.
mm. So, one hand, an being opportunistic, on the other hand, being an inherent problem solver. I guess those were some of the traits that really,
Yeah, my
uh,
dad for sure. My dad
yeah.
he was a natural born leader. He did so in the service. He was a leader, when he was in school. He's just everything in his whole life. After working, he joined a barbershop chorus, and he didn't just join; he became like the head of the chorus and
Mhm,
took audited gardening classes at Rutgers. And he didn't just go and take a class; he ended up earning a master's gardener certificate, and he did everything from a leader mindset. You know,
mhm.
if
So,
I live long enough to ever be half the leader he is, I think I'd be proud of myself.
mhm. Well, I think you've done pretty well in your chapter of the journey. But something else when we were talking before this show that stood out for me was that your dad seemed to be willing to, when it came to a customer problem, there was just an inherent tendency to say yes, you know, yes, we could take that on. When you think about that mindset, um, how is that showing up today? Is it showing up today? Like, do you see it in yourself? Do you see it in the current iteration of Haig service? Like, talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I distinctly remember a conversation. I was probably maybe a freshman in high school, and my dad had at that time was still installing TV antennas, was also repairing telephone answering machines back in the day, and anything else that he could get the repair out of a little shop we had in our basement. And I learned electronics, and that was, my side jobs, to repair things. And a lot of times we'd be down there working together, or one of us would be working and the other would come down, and we'd have conversations. And I remember distinctly having a discussion with him that, it was pretty cool tracing through circuits and finding, the the IC that was bad, or the transistor that was bad, or what was bad in the thing. And it's like solving a puzzle. And it was a bonding moment, because that's really what I think drove my father. It wasn't, I don't think it really was money. I mean, clearly he had a family to support, and he was
Mhm,
going to put kids through college and all that. But he was naturally like a problem solver. I think it's inherently curiosity, right?
mhm,
You got to be curious. If you're curious, you'll become learned, and if you're learned, you become useful. And I think that was just his core.
mhm. When you were young, was it more, Rick, about, when you started, because you started to tinker with electronics and sort of following that problem solved path at a young age? Was it more like for you, was it kind of fun just doing something with your dad, or were you also like inherently intrigued by the technology itself? Or was it both?
It was not from a standpoint of wanting to be an entrepreneur or be in business for myself. Although my grandfather and father both, my grandfather never had that opportunity. Wanted my father to have it. My father had a small opportunity later in life, right? After establishing himself, to have his own business. And then he always drilled in us, get your education and then do whatever you want to do. Be a mechanic, do whatever you want to do, open any business, you know. But I didn't want to, I resisted that hard. I wanted nothing more than to be in corporate America and drive my BMW with a wine rack in the back in the executive program, and it's like one of those things that a product of the 80s and early 90s. But I did learn electronics, and I did like solving problems. I've also always been naturally curious. As a
Mhm,
kid, I can remember one of my earliest birthday gifts was a microscope, because I loved looking at things under a microscope. And I had a telescope to look at the moon and the stars when they were landing, the first landings on the moon were happening and all kinds. I was just a naturally curious kid.
mhm,
which obviously I think came from my dad. And
Yeah.
so we I did work there. He also happened to pay me more, to work and do repairs for him in the basement than the at the time I think was like $2.85 minimum wage I could get working at Denny's or something. So, you know, it
Step up.
wasn't it was a win-win.
Now, you mentioned microscope. I want to touch on that because
Mm.
as I understand your backstory, going into college, you were thinking pre-med at one point. And
Yeah,
then,
coming out of college, I wasn't thinking pre-med, but coming
yeah.
out of college, I got my degrees both in chemistry and biology. I was pre-med, and by my junior year in college, it was um, I loved chemistry and biology. I still do. I can't ever say I really used my major, except for maybe to in the fitness field and
Mhm.
biohacking and nutrition, stuff like that now, and maybe to mix a good martini. But, um, but it was a, it fostered curiosity. I enjoyed the kind of, I enjoy the scientific method to
Mhm.
things and so on, but I did finish my degrees at the University of Delaware in chemistry and biology.
And you also, before we got on, mentioned that there was kind of a bit of a pivotal moment in your education. You took a business class,
Mm.
and something there triggered you. Talk about that for a moment. You took a class in business, and suddenly, something shifted mentally, or something opened up mentally. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I don't know that something actually shifted mentally there. I never really changed my position because of a class. I actually only took one class as an undergrad in
Mhm.
business at all, and it was, I think, as I told you, it was on a bet.
Yeah.
It was my senior year in college, and the sophomore that lived next door to me in the student housing, you know, just felt that he was a marketing genius and said, I bet you couldn't survive in a marketing class because all you think about is, science and this and that.
Branding. Yeah.
I took it. I won the bet, you know, and it was what it was. But it didn't really shift my
Yeah.
mindset there. At that point, I'd actually already started um, doing the business. I started the business as a business, not just as a summer job or something like that. My junior year in college, and I would drive back and forth from Delaware to Jersey. I'd usually drive home most Fridays. I would install security or other
Mhm.
systems in homes and stuff like that over the weekends, and I would go back with a couple $1,000s in my pocket on Monday. Um, so it was a pretty good gig then too, and it was probably right around there that was really the trigger. I had a couple of people work. We had a couple of people working for us already
Mhm.
by then, even though I wasn't in the state all the time, and it that was kind of the trigger to say, this is a pretty good gig. Maybe I don't need to go on to med school, and maybe I can kind of realize, um, you know, a sense of purpose and what I like to do here and build something, an enterprise.
So
Um,
it sounded like basically, even before you got out of college, um, the business had already started to shift from kind of call it a weekend side hustle to something more akin to a true business. Was it really starting to take form at
yeah. I
that
mean,
point?
I had a business line that rang into my dorm room. All right. So
Okay.
and so it was my business line, and that's actually where Rick comes from versus Richard. All everybody growing up, called me Rich or Richard. And every once in a while, you just don't feel like answering the business phone, right? So I had one line that rang into my dorm room that was my business phone. And so if somebody called up and asked for Rick, I knew it was a business call, and I just say, no, he's not here. I'm his roommate. Can I take a message? But if they asked for Rich, I knew it was my personal call.
That's great. So at that point already, I mean, had it sounds like you were already in the business. Like, so was there ever really a discussion with your dad, like, hey, I'm doing this now, or how did that Did that
Oh yeah.
create?
Oh
You
yeah.
did.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I had a business line ring, a line ringing into my house, and I mean, into the condo and all that. But since 1971, we grew up as kids answering a old three line push button
Yeah.
phone in the kitchen, and we knew it was exactly 1.8 miles from Route 22 to our driveway to give directions to customers, and we had the three-part message pad right next to the phone where we'd have to take messages for everybody, and we knew which line was a business line and would answer as Haig service, so it was my mom was doing all my dad's books and everything else.
So you literally grew up in the business. I mean, you were kind of
Yeah, oh yeah,
immersed in it, and
yeah,
it was pretty clear then
for
coming.
good and bad, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So it was pretty clear to you once you were leaving school that this is because you were already doing it. This was what you were going to do. I mean, it sounds like it
yeah,
crystallized even before you graduated. Wow.
yeah, without a doubt. By my junior year, like I said, by then I was driving back and forth in a decent car, making good money, and I
Mm,
liked what I was doing. I liked working, and selling and everything about it. And it was during the building boom in the late '80s and '90s, early '90s, so there was an abundance of work. It was an easy path.
yeah. So your journey is kind of interesting as we move forward in it a little further. There were periods where you essentially stepped away from the business. One episode where you looked to open up fitness centers. I think another chapter where you stepped away to pursue endurance athletics at a very high level. So, talk about those periods in your story and what were driving those decisions at the time. Like, what was prompting you to step away or step into something else in those chapters?
I think partly because I had started so early,
Hmm.
and it's all consuming. I mean,
Hmm.
when in the beginning stages of business, it's all consuming, and I think like anything else, you tend to burn out. Whether it's fitness or and training or sport or whatever, you tend to maybe burn out or have these highs and lows. When I turned 40, I we had a good business,
Hmm.
good lifestyle business going. We had employees. I had people that could run it, and I decided I'm going to kind of just step back and let the people run it. And that's when I went off for about 5 years, 5.5 years, and in essence was a professional amateur triathlete. I
Hmm.
spent 32 hours a week training. I did what eventually became 14 Ironmans, a number of shorter triathlons, ultra endurance marathons, and stuff like that. And I loved training. I loved the work of
Hmm.
that. It wasn't even so much the racing. He did the races, but it was really the work that I liked, and I liked being able to dedicate my time to it.
Mm.
But then, after about 4 or 5 years of focusing only on that, thinking that was going to retire at that point and just stay with whatever else I was going to do. I realized that I kind of drew the finish line too soon. We
Mm.
had a house; it was paid off. We had kids; everything was good. Had an income, but I had been exposed to and around for then a number of years. Um, uh, EO, the Entrepreneurs
Hmm.
Organization, and Vern Harnish and crew, and all of the folks around that. And even my training partner did all the triathlons. He's got a very successful large car dealership network that he had with his father, multi-generational as well. And I just saw the growth and the lifestyle that he was having, and that what a lot of the guys in EO that really were like my tribe were
Hmm.
doing. I realized that, okay, I kind of recouped a bit, and I went back into the company and began growing it again. Then at 50, I decided to do the same thing. And I says, at that time we had grown quite a bit, you know, doubled or tripled the company at that point. And I remember one day going into the corporate office and saying to my assistant, I says, I'm going to the gym and I'm not coming back. And she thought I was leaving for the day. I went down the street. I went down the highway to a small gym, a 24-hour Snap Fitness that my wife actually belonged to. I walked in there and looked around, saw the owner. I told him, I says, my wife really likes your gym. He said, thank you. And I says, I really wish I could buy a gym like this. And he said, funny enough, I wish I could sell a gym like this. And 2 weeks later, I owned it.
Oh
So
my gosh.
I opened that, and then I opened a CrossFit box next door to it, and I did that full time. I've never been happier. Even as much as I love this business, I never been happier than when I had my boxes and my gym over there, and getting to coach people and getting them to be able to do hard stuff
Mm.
I never thought they could do, and the changes in their lives and everything that they did. I did that for 7 years. And then in 2016, I closed all of that down. On top of, during that time frame, I also bought a franchise brand of fitness centers, functional fitness centers.
Mhm.
And we had 28 franchisees, um, striping from Minnesota down to Houston, through the middle of the country. Um, Closed all that down, I guess, luckily enough, January of 2020, right before COVID. So timing was on our side there,
I
you
feel
know.
like it was.
Yeah, yeah. So and there actually is still one of those franchisees is still in business with their unit, and it was their passion, and they were just rock stars.
Mm.
They were doing great in Iowa right now, still to this day. But and it's 100% their business, not mine. It's not a franchise anymore. But I came back into this company mainly because it had had some troubles and had been ignored and
Mhm.
improperly staffed. So that was 2016-17 timeframe, and I came back into here and
Was that
went
was
about
that really
doing it.
was that the impetus for closing down the fitness operations and coming back to Hague? Was it really
Yeah, yeah.
noticing that the company
It's a
needed
focus. Yeah, it's
yeah.
a focus thing. The franchise business. One is, I've learned, I've learned a lot of lessons from mostly from mistakes. And I had bought that franchise brand and the business of the franchising from Peter Taunton, the CEO of Snap Fitness. And I
Mhm.
remember one discussion, because he would have, monthly meetings or whenever I wanted to kind of help me with trying to build that thing and get it turned around, because it needed to be turned around. And he was pretty pointed with one time when he said, "Listen, um, you're not in the business of being a coach. You're in the business of selling franchises. You got to sell franchises." And it's when it dawned on me that, I went into that because I thought, well, geez, if we have 25, 28, develop it 100, 200, 1,000 franchises, I could be a coach for all of these coaches and touch that many more lives. And
Mhm.
that's what I wanted it for. But he was right. The realization is that it's like a real estate business. You're in the business of selling real estate. You're in the business of selling franchises, not coaching.
Mm.
And that was so that, and once that realization came across, I saw things going down and just kind of said, turn over what I can to the people that are doing it because it's their passion, and give it to them and move on.
Mm.
And that way I'll focus on
Yeah,
this business that really needed attention.
understood. So beyond, that realization, as you look back at those chapters where you did step away, what what did those time periods really what did you learn about yourself? You stepped into a totally different business model from what you were in, so it would seem,
Mhm.
from, fire and security into fitness. That's a different channel. So when you look back, what were some of the takeaways from that journey that you learned about yourself, that you learned about business, or maybe even something that helped you be a better leader when you stepped back to Hague?
All of the above. I
Yeah.
mean, it's all of the above. I mean, I did learn a lot about myself, not so much that it changed how I was or what my core being was, but I realized that, just like some of the other people that I used to train with and race with in triathlon, CrossFit competitions, and so on, there's a certain, and certainly within EO with the entrepreneurs, there's a certain DNA that just likes to do hard shit. Excuse the language, but that's just, you know,
Yeah.
that's just the term, right? They just like to do hard stuff, right? They're just badasses in my eyes, and it's, the term is badassery. It's just, that's what they do, and I realize that's, I without calling myself a badass, and sounding egotistical, I do like to do hard stuff. It's just
Hmm.
what it is, and so did my dad. I mean, my dad ran his first marathon at 55. All right, so
Wow.
he it's just in the DNA, and I recognize that you have to be around, I guess, long enough and see it enough before the light bulb comes on. And I realize that, and I'm seeing that now in some of the younger talent that we hire, or some of my kids' friends. Like, I've got a young kid that I'm kind of coaching along here a little bit, that just walked into our house, saw a bunch of medals in our house from Ironmans, and said, "That looks pretty cool." And just decided, he, at 19 or 20 years old, he says, I'm gonna do Ironman Lake Placid next year. And he sure as hell is, because he's done all the training for it, and he's set up to do Ironman Lake Placid this year. He's
Wow.
that DNA.
Hmm.
And I learned that about myself. I recognize that I like the work. As I said, I like the training. It's not even so much the racing. Um, I like the work of building a company, whether it's successful or it's a mistake. Either way, it's a lesson, and you learn from the mistakes as much, if not more, than the successes. You just have to have that curiosity to say that, why did I fail, or what can I learn from it? And then reevaluate and move forward again.
Mm.
So I learned that during that time, and a lot from not only owning gyms and stuff like that, but from do working in and training in the sports and so on during the previous
Mm.
break I took, during that break. um it's directly transferable to business. If you enjoy the work, or you embrace the work, and you recognize that you don't always have the answer, and that you're not always right, you can be confident. But the minute you think you're always right, or you already know the answer, you're no longer curious, which means you're no longer learning, which
Mm.
means, frankly, you're no longer useful.
That's so powerful what you said and what you just shared. And, you know, my takeaway is, even in training for Ironmans or other high level endurance competitions, to your point, it's not the competition, it's the journey, you know,
Absolutely.
just like it is in business, it's the journey. And, as I track back to the journey you were on in opening up fitness centers, once you realize what the journey ahead was about,
Yeah.
it wasn't the destination of getting to 1,000. It's like, boy, am I going to enjoy the journey of getting to 1,000 if this is really what this business model is? And I think you said, well, no, that's not a good journey for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the business model is a great model.
Yeah.
What I didn't have was the right team, because it was just
Hmm.
me, right?
Yeah.
Me
Yeah.
and a handful of other really talented and motivated coaches that all shared a love for coaching.
Mm.
If I'd had a partner, or an equity firm behind us, or something like that, that was a an operator, right, a
Yeah.
franchisor, as their motivation, we'd have soared. It was a great
Yeah.
fitness model. It was
Yeah.
what the product was fantastic.
Yeah.
It just was. I didn't realize what business I was in, and
Hmm.
assembled the team or the skill set that was wrong for what I
Yeah.
thought it was. That's all.
Yeah. And in the backdrop, you had Haig Service Corp saying, Rick, I think we need you back, or at least you
Yeah,
felt those
yeah.
signals, right?
I had an EA at the time that she was just way overqualified for the position, but I loved her to death, and she was extremely caring about the company that when I left and said I wasn't coming back, she stayed.
Mm.
So during those 6 or 7 years, she was there,
Yeah.
and she finally came to the gym one day, and got on the arc trainer. I used to make them get on the elliptical or the arc trainer. I said, I'll have all the meetings you want, but you have to be walking on the arc trainer or the treadmill next to me, right? For the length of the meeting. As soon as you stop, the meeting's over. She came there and laid her papers out on the display of the arc trainer one time, got on there and says, you got to go back. If you don't, it's going out of business. And by the way, I hate to do it, but I quit. And then she got off, and I knew if she was coming to me and saying that,
Yeah.
she was leaving because she just can't do it anymore, and it's gonna fail if you don't go back, that she was
Mm.
right. So,
Yeah.
and she was. Once I got there, it was really evident, because when I walked away for 7 years, I mean, I really walked away, and it made it
Yeah.
hard for him to come talk to me because they had to exercise.
That's a good model, though.
Yeah.
That definitely keeps a lot of the chit chat out of the meetings, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. You want to talk about standing meetings? Never mind that.
So somewhere along the way, just getting back to Haig, Haig Service Corp, you transitioned the business. At one point, at one point, obviously in the early years, you were doing all kinds of different things for all kinds of different scenarios. So, you were doing residential work way back, but then eventually the business shifted more and more and more exclusively into the commercial fire and life safety.
Yeah.
So, talk about that transition. Was that kind of a recognition that, hey, this is who we truly are, this is where we should be? How did that evolve from moving away from the residential and going full in on the commercial side of the business?
I think it was partially a recognition, and a good one, as it turned out, uh, because the residential market has kind of gone more of the do-it-yourself and IoT and everything else, and so it's become very different. But the the commercial, we had started doing, supplementing our regular income with incremental income on public bids in schools and municipalities and stuff like that locally in New Jersey. And
Hmm.
then 2005, I went through a process that was, again, a learning process, and one that I was successful with in acquiring a bankrupt company that had spun out of a public company, called Airwave Integration. And they had an office in New Jersey that we folded into our New Jersey office. They also had offices in Tampa and or Fort Lauderdale,
Hmm.
and they were, before they took a big downhill slide, they were one of the top or largest commercial fire alarm companies, engineered systems in the country.
Mm.
Um, so folding that in and taking over those assets through the federal bankruptcy court, of those companies, um, dramatically skewed, what our business composition or balance was, towards large commercial and multifamily dwelling, like high-rise condos and so on in Florida, and hotels and all that. I mean, January 23rd, 2005 was my closing date on that company with the bankruptcy trustee. I forced him to do it on that day because it was my dad's birthday, and I wanted him to see the company. That's was the first time that it made our company one of the largest in the country, as ranked by our trade magazines, and so I wanted him to see that. At the time, he was also sick with bone cancer, so
Mm.
it meant a lot.
Mm.
And but we went from being a $1 or $2 million company with 12 employees one day, to signing papers the next and having an additional 112 employees in three different offices across 1,100 miles. And was it was a shock.
Well, no, I can't imagine because no, I can't really imagine. So I got to ask, how there must have been other companies vying for that business. How is it that you were able to navigate that and ultimately win that acquisition?
Um, 2 or 3 iterations, and originally I was just again curious. I got in the old fax machine, right next to the lunch menus. It came in this public announcement of a court date happening in the courthouse in Newark, and that this company was being the bankruptcy was being heard, in Chapter 11 and everything else. So I said, well, let's see what's going on with this. And I went and I showed up, and I met the um, CEO that of at the time there in court, and actually struck a probably 25-year friendship up with him at that point. 20-year friendship with him at that point. He was brilliant. He just had a, 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 a few problems there that took it down. But um, the judge was hearing, whether to award the company back to the existing ownership for them to try to turn it around in Chapter 11. He
Mhm.
did, and I watched it and learned a little bit about the process. Next time when they had to come back because they still had problems, they said, well, okay, we're going to hear offers from other companies, and there were two larger national companies, that were there, and him, and representing his company and myself, and I got up in front of the judge and said, I'll give you this much for the assets. This is who I am. This is where we are. And if you're gonna take it away from the existing ownership, who I was supporting at the time, they were actually working out of my office. I was trying to help them. Um, you know, if you give it back, then I'm fine. I'll continue to support them. If you don't, make it a real simple deal this way. you know. And I distinctly remember the judge, after hearing the other two, rather elaborate offer structures and all of that, thanking me for the simplicity of my offer, you know, but saying, he can't. He has to go for the benefit of the trustees and so on to one of the others. But for the time being, he was going to award it back to the existing ownership to try to turn around one more time.
Mhm.
So he did. And again, just watching the process and appreciating the fact that the judge was actually very polite to a naive person, right? Um, I went around the court, went around the system, and sent a registered letter to the judge the day after and said, "Hey, listen, these assets of these customers are a very tense situation. The value is the recurring revenue of this customer base, and day by day, it's trading. You're seeing attrition moving away. It's not in the best interest of the debt holders and so on that this go to zero. So, you know, instead of going through this process again a third time, if this doesn't succeed, right, in the existing hands, how about just pre-approving my offer as the backup so that on said date, it just becomes mine. And then we can keep this thing running. I'm already familiar with the base because we're helping the existing
Mhm.
ownership." And he did. I don't know. No, even the bankruptcy trustee and the accounting firm that was behind him, and everybody was like, I don't know what made him do it, but he did. And so, 30 days later, everybody was called back to court, and the judge says, okay, we haven't made enough progress to say that this can be turned around. So I'm going to once again thank Mr. Haig for the simplicity of his offer that I've already pre-approved, and it's his company. And it was amazing. It was
Wow.
amazing. It was amazing. It transformed our company, and it was our launching pad. And then, about a day later, I realized that also meant that I won $3.5 million of debt to buy that company, but
Mhm.
and another 1.5 million that I had to go into debt to put down on the company. So it was about 5 million in debt. So, but it
A
worked.
bold move, but it worked out, and it also,
Yeah, it's my
yes.
motto, man. Once you get past zero, it just doesn't hurt anymore.
But what I think it also set into motion was something that's been a very important part of the company's growth since, which is acquisitions.
Yeah.
So, and I believe you've now, I don't know how many you've done, but I know there's been a number of them, 4 or 5, right? Maybe more.
Yeah, five, six, somewhere in there. Yeah, we just did
Okay.
one in January that was actually a dual closing. It was two companies, one's very small one and one that was a reasonable size that was right in our bite size kind of category,
Mhm.
a couple $1 million in revenue type size.
So talk about that for a minute. This idea of, a lot of people, are focused on organic growth. Some see acquisition as a path to growth. Talk about scaling for a moment, through the model of acquisition versus organic growth, or perhaps a combination of the two.
I don't think they're isolated in the least. I mean, everything you're doing as far as scaling is either for income and value to a family, the family business, next generations, and so on, or to an investor or private equity or somebody you have a fiduciary responsibility to. And either way, it's the same thing. I mean, you're trying to generate and create wealth and value over a long period of time. Otherwise, it's not valuable to anybody. And um, There are different stages of growth, head counts, revenue levels, everything else that I've found over the years um, are peaks and optimization points and troughs and death valleys in between.
Mhm.
The chasms that you have to jump or speed across. You can't flounder across them or you'll die. Um, and as we again as we've done it, both floundering and jumping over the years a few times, I've learned it, and I've noticed that almost every acquisition we've made has been in one of those floundering troughs. Okay. So there's certain stages we buy companies and we know where they're attractive. But once you acquire a company, we've always found that in the service industry, right, there's usually a pent up demand or for attention or for work amongst a customer base because they've either been neglected for lack of resources and talent, or because an owner has lost interest,
Mhm.
either by age or has been doing it too long and burned out or whatever. So we've recognized the acquisition portion as far as for the top line to be the rapid growth component. We look to acquire a company in a certain size that, 1 to say 3 million in top line revenue, and over the course of the following 36 months, double and double. So usually within the first 12 months, we'll double their revenue. And then over the next 18 to 24, we'll double it again. And we had done that with ours between 2021 and 2024. And then after that, we try to identify the handful, the two or three key KPIs that really are the levers to pull, the accelerator and the brake, pedals, right?
Mhm.
And in our case, it's the recurring revenue. We know that if we grow our recurring revenue by 20% or more in any given fiscal year, the following year we will achieve the 8 to 12% organic growth of that legacy base, that would generally be considered a healthy company in the eyes of private equity or investors and otherwise. So the
Mhm.
organic growth is that piece, our legacy based company. We do track our KPIs and look for that 8 to 12% growth, while the little acquisitions that we bolt on strategically um, represent more of a rapid growth to get us a stronger trajectory across those chasms that
Mhm.
come. We also find that these acquisitions are extremely effective for talent acquisition because they tend to have um, some level of talent within in there as far as on the front lines that are familiar
Mhm.
with customer bases and bring skill sets that we may need or don't have. They tend to be run very similarly because they're generally small lifestyle type businesses. which fits well in our culture because we at our heart are a family business, regardless of how small or large our top line and bottom line are.
Mm,
So there's a lot of advantages there. It also is somewhat of a known commodity. Like you can look back and make your offer and make your deal structure based on trailing 12-month and 36-month revenue streams and EBITDAs and so on. It's not like you have to go out and say, let's go invest in some new sales offer or something out there and see if it pays off. There's a history there, so you can kind of map
mm,
it.
mm. It sounds like you've got the model for acquisition down to almost a science at this point in terms of what you're looking for and how to size up the right inflection points, to approach a company. Out of curiosity,
Maybe I did use my science degree then.
there you go. The that being said, there's still obviously a lot of you know twists and turns to getting to a final decision, a final close. Even the first one, that took some interesting twists and turns. So
Yeah.
how many might you pursue in a given calendar year, kind of to get to that right one? As you said, you recently closed on two, but how many will you kind of go down the path with to get to that one or two right ones that ultimately close?
Well, let's put it this way: between 2021 and well, really weren't looking to do an acquisition in 21 to 23. That was when we were focused on the organic growth for ourselves and laying in our new model and structure that really launched us. But the between 23 and 26, we were trying to close companies and would get to the 1 yard line repetitively. I mean, to the point of flying into Little Rock, Arkansas, and meeting with the family that owned a company down there and meeting their employees and everything, only to then not get to final contract. Right.
Mm.
So, it's because they are closely held. They're lifestyle businesses. And as much as, at times I love my company and don't love my company, it's the
Mhm,
same thing with them.
mhm,
This is their baby. It's something that they're very closely tied to. So it's hard. It's really hard to let go. And most of the time, I don't think it's a financial decision because we do offer them equity stakes and holding on to their pieces of their companies that while we grow it and double it and how it folding into a larger entity, it has inherently a larger value. So, we show them ways to exponentially improve their wealth uh,
mhm,
by being involved with us. But it's still an emotional decision to let go. So
mhm,
it a lot of times the decisions for on both sides come down to emotion. And when the emotions line up, they close. And in this case, it took us almost 3 years to get these two to close. And we've got two more right now in the wings that we have agreement with. We're just trying to paper the right language so that we can fold their bases in and move on with them too. It's
wow.
when it kind of like it rains, it pours.
That's great. Um, Want to touch on another subject which has been top of mind for so many of our guests, AI and automation,
Mm,
which are entering and reshaping, it would seem, nearly every industry.
yep.
Um, Talk about that, your perspectives, Rick, on AI and how it might be impacting your business now or maybe in the years to come, as well as automation.
I don't think it's going to have anything but a positive effect on my business, my company, my industry, and any industry. To get on a soapbox about it, I'm kind of tired of listening to newscasts about college students worrying about getting a job and how much they hate AI and booing AI CEOs. I mean, setting aside any corporate garbage going on, right? You can't blame somebody for discovering and advancing science. It's what we're here for, you
Yeah.
know. And this just like robotics. I mean, we're in the service robotics business, right? We have cleaning robots that roll around buildings, do in a commercial sense like a Roomba. but on a much bigger scale. And we'll constantly fight, with cleaning staff about you're taking my job, and it's not. It's a force multiplier, and AI is just that too. It's a force multiplier in our company. We don't run a company full of bots, and there hasn't been a single person in my company that has lost their job because of AI taking over, automation taking over. We're still hiring. We've been hiring on a tear this year, and the AI just makes it more effective, and it frees up so much time and adds so much to our leaves so much of our gross profit there. We know what our gross profit margins are. Our guys in the field are doing a great job, and our managers are managing our direct expenses and things perfectly. The places most companies will lose their money is on the SG&A side, the overhead side. And that's where all of the AI can come in, save, you know, hours and days and weeks. I mean, a small task that might take somebody 15 minutes they're doing every day, automated, means that there's no 15 or 20 minutes before to switch to that task and 15 or 20 minutes before they switch to another task. So it amounts to about an hour a day. And when you take into account an hour a day, that's what, like 5 weeks of time
Yeah.
you just buy back for automating a 15-minute task.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been going through with my leadership team month after month for the last year. Just give me the little rocks. Let's go with the little rocks, no big rocks, just those little 15-minute tasks, and we'll get them automated and get them off your plate. If you're doing it every day, if you're doing it once a week, if you're doing it on a regular basis, whatever it is, let's get that automated. No one's going to lose their job. Everybody's too busy anyway. So
Very true.
I love AI. I'm loving it's there. I'm inherently, like I said, curious
Mhm.
with the speed that all this stuff is changing. You can't help but be curious to see what this stuff can do now.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's definitely an interesting times that we're living in. And, this is one that I think is, certainly in my industry, and I'm sure in yours, we've seen technology shifts, we've seen disruptive innovation, we've seen new innovation, new technology. But this is, as I think back to my tenure here, one of the first that seems to touch on virtually every industry, if not all industries. So that's kind of,
Yeah, this is transformational.
yeah,
This is like
yeah,
mechanical revolution. This is
yeah.
transformational. It's going to change everything.
So when you think about the future as you look ahead, and I know you have some kids, but I don't know that they're looking to be the G3 at Haig service, or I don't know if that's on the table. It doesn't sound like it is.
No,
Um,
none of my,
so
I have 3 daughters, and
they're not.
none of them have taken to the company in any way, shape, or form. And I'm not upset about that.
Yeah.
I really don't want them to be in this company. I want
Mhm.
them to be in a business eventually, and or my grandkids, because I have a grandson now. Maybe him
Maybe.
someday, but not in this company.
Mhm.
My hope for this company, and I think would be the hope for of my father and my grandfather before him, was that this is a vehicle, it's a tool, it's a force multiplier for what we're really trying to do, which is just move our family up one step and forward. We don't need to be having each generation reinvent the wheel, just move them forward. So my grandfather came here as an Armenian orphan. He somehow managed to get a degree from Cornell in electrical engineering. My father grew up a depression baby. He grew up knowing and died knowing every day that tomorrow everything you have could be gone, because it was. You
Mm.
He had an electrical engineering degree from Cornell and a master's degree in operations research. Incredibly brilliant man. And he moved our family forward. My grandfather was worried about just putting food on the table and having a house, right? And he did that successfully. Put my father through school and got him educated. My father moved us into a different, upper middle class, and none. It was never easy for him, and that's why he works so much. And I kind of have always grown up saying, my job is to take that family to the next level, right? And we're very fortunate. We're blessed. We have very different opportunities than even my father did. And so with this company, I'm trying to build it, scale it, and do what's best for the company and the employees within it, because there's only so far I think I can take it before a private equity or a family office or somebody coming in with big bankrolls, different agendas, and longer term prospects, right? Maybe a younger CEO and so on, that will take the employees and grow a $200 million company, right? And offer them, upward mobility within companies and so on. So that's probably our next step here, is to bring in investment, private equity, or exit into a larger organization for the benefit of the company and the employees, as well as, for myself and my family, as far as the wealth that we've created in growing the company, and then hopefully take that wealth. And I'm not looking to retire anytime soon again. So, and I have a very long, projected lifespan horizon, as with the biohacking and everything else. So, I'm hoping, to maybe go more towards that, funding a family office and continue to do what I'm doing now, which is, acting as a CEO, acting on boards, valuing companies, combining companies and channels for creation of wealth and opportunity and so on. And that company, I could see my kids coming into, or grandkids coming into, because there they have the flexibility and the freedom to do whatever they want. They don't have to be an alarm guy.
Well, I love the way you framed that, and I loved it's such a healthy perspective and a genuine one at that. And Rick, I feel like we could talk for hours, if not days, about this. But last question for you: if any of our listeners did want to learn more about your story, your journey, or learn more about Haig Services Corp, what's the best way for them to connect?
Haig Services on Facebook, Haig Service Corp, I believe, and Instagram at Haig Service Corp, LinkedIn, Haig Service Corporation. I'm personally on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place to connect with me. My email, you have my email. You can stick that in the notes. I'm willing to connect with anybody out there. I geek out over all of this stuff, not just alarms, but just business in general. It's my tribe. So feel free.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. Well, to wrap up, Rick, what really stands out in your story especially is that long-term business success is not always linear. Took some twists and turns, adaptation, resilience, some stepping away, stepping back, some calculated risks for sure, reinvention, and then just a willingness to continue to evolve and continue to stay naturally curious, as you stated a few times in this discussion, and recognizing that that's the key to a sustaining business and that continuity of prosperity that we're all looking for. And for family business, especially, shifts often happen across generations, forcing that next gen leader to really evaluate what's the new landscape, but also not lose sight of, hey, what's gotten us here too, while keeping the business going forward. So Rick, thanks so much for sharing your story, your perspectives. Again, we've been speaking with Rick Haig of Haig Service Corp, and I'm your host, Ed Delia, and this has been another episode of Growing Up B2B. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Rick, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ed.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning into Growing Up B2B. To explore more episodes and insights, visit podcast.delianet.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice. Having worked with hundreds of family-led businesses across my career, and being a second-generation leader myself, I'm on a mission to help every family business I meet achieve next-level growth for their organization. So feel free also to connect with me on LinkedIn, and let's support each other. You can also find out more about my company at delianet.com. Again, I'm your host, Ed Delia, and thanks so much for joining us today. Take care.